"Don't sit there," the boy whispered. "That's Hazel's table. She talks to napkins." Hazel Quinn sat alone, as always. The cafeteria buzzed with the rising tide of Friday chatter, clattering trays, fizzing sodas, laughter that skipped from table to table like pebbles on a pond, but it broke like surf against the invisible wall around her. She didn't eat much. The plastic tray in front of her held a carton of milk she wouldn't open, and an untouched ham sandwich with the corner of the bread already curling dry. Her spoon stirred at nothing. Instead, Hazel pulled a napkin from the wire holder, flattened it on the table, and began to draw. Her fingers were stained faintly blue from an old ballpoint pen she'd stolen from the library, lost and found. The napkin trembled under the pressure of her grip, but she steadied it with her other hand, thumb pressing gently on the edge as if anchoring it against some internal current. The first line curved softly, a spiral, not perfect, but breathing. Then a loop. Then a smaller arc nested inside like a ripple caught mid-motion. Her eyes flicked upward only once, not to meet anyone's gaze, but to scan the ceiling, as if following something only she could see. To the others, she was the weird girl. To Hazel, the napkin was the only surface in town where the water still told the truth. She'd drawn it again and again, the way it pressed into itself beneath the stone wall near the east side of the Millbend Dam. She'd sat by the riverbank just last weekend, sketchbook tucked under her jacket, watching the eddies form that peculiar figure 8 where the current should have run smooth. She hadn't told anyone. Not because she was hiding, but because she didn't have anyone to tell. The teachers didn't ask where Hazel sat. They never had. She used to have a table, last year before her dad disappeared into the water one August night and never came back. Before the rescue teams pulled up nothing but his tackle box and the busted seat of his old canoe. Before her mother began speaking in half sentences and full silences. Now Hazel sat here. Always here. Same seat. Table in the corner. Napkin. Pen. Spiral. Across the cafeteria, a pair of boys glanced her way. "Why's she always drawing that whirlpool thing?" one muttered. The other shrugged. "My sister said she's like, not all there. She drew something on the bathroom wall last month and called it echo pressure." Laughter. Then a hush as a teacher walked by. Hazel didn't flinch. She'd learned to let noise pass through her like wind through branches, but her pen slowed for a moment, then picked up again. This time her lines more jagged, less curved. There was something wrong with the spiral today. It folded in a way it hadn't yesterday. The pressure was shifting. The napkin sagged slightly from the moisture in the air. Rain was coming. The thick, southern kind that seeped into the seams of things. Hazel felt it behind her eyes. She always did. And she remembered something. The model. Yesterday, on the bulletin board near the auditorium, they'd pinned a laminated rendering of the Millbend Centennial Celebration. Big fonts, balloons, fireworks, and right there in the bottom right corner, a digital 3D mock-up of the old dam lit up in gold with the words, "Fireworks Launch Site, 8 p.m. Saturday." Hazel had stared at it too long. Not because it was exciting. She never went to things like that. But because something about the image made her ribs tighten. The dam, the fireworks, the echo. Back at the table, her pen pressed a little harder. She sketched a simple curve, then another, then a pressure wave. Her drawing wasn't pretty. It looked like loops made by someone who had never taken physics, but it wasn't meant to be beautiful. It was meant to say something's wrong. She didn't have the words for it. No scientific vocabulary, no equations. But in her bones, Hazel knew. The dam wasn't just old. It was tired. And the launch site for the fireworks sat right above a stone vault she'd watched shiver once when thunder struck last spring. She didn't tell the teachers. She didn't tell her mom. She just drew the dam, over and over, on napkins, on the back of her science homework, on the inside of her wrist with washable marker, because someone had to remember the shape of how things bend before they break. That afternoon, during dismissal, Hazel lingered. The rain had started, soft and whispering, slipping into the seams of her backpack. She walked slowly, cutting behind the gym, past the playground, to the chain-link fence that bordered the woods. Beyond that, the trail led down to the overlook, the one that faced the river. She stood at the edge. The river looked calm. It always did. But beneath it, Hazel imagined the current like a ribbon being pulled too tight. Her dad used to say, "It's not the crash that gets you, it's the quiet before it. Rivers don't warn out loud." She reached into her jacket, pulled out the napkin, and watched as a drop of rain landed right in the center of the spiral. The ink bled, but the shape remained. She folded it once, tucked it in her pocket, and turned away, not realizing that behind her, at the top of the school steps, someone had been watching. Ben Carter, engineering intern, 25, with a clipboard under his arm and doubt in his heart. He'd been assigned to help model the acoustic reverb patterns around the dam for the fireworks show, a last-minute add-on no one cared much about. But the image Hazel had just drawn, that spiral, matched something he'd seen last night. A wobble in the pressure map. A ripple in the force diagram he couldn't explain. He watched the girl walk away, soaking slowly in the drizzle, her head down, her steps even. And in his hand, he held a printed simulation that was starting to fall apart exactly where her spiral had pointed. It wasn't the ink that mattered. It was where it bled. Ben Carter hadn't meant to pick it up. The napkin was damp, curled at the corners, half stuck to the cafeteria floor beneath a chair nobody ever used. Most interns would have kept walking, especially with rain blowing in sideways through the open hallway windows, but something about the shape caught his eye. It wasn't just doodling, not the aimless squiggles of bored kids waiting for lunch to end. It was deliberate, spiraled, weighted. He peeled it off the tile gently, careful not to tear the soft paper. One edge was smeared where rain had found it, but the rest remained. A sequence of arcs, not quite circular, each one pulling tighter toward a pressure point slightly off-center, like a storm that refused to form a perfect eye. Ben stared at it for a moment, then glanced around. No one had noticed. No one ever noticed much in Mill Bend Junior High. That night, in the back room of the municipal engineering trailer just beyond the main dam control station, Ben laid the napkin beside his laptop and compared it to the simulation printouts from earlier that week. He rubbed his eyes, then looked again. The resemblance was uncanny. The ripple pattern forming at vault section D4 of the dam, the one he'd flagged in orange on a hunch, matched the off-centered spiral on the napkin almost perfectly. It wasn't science. It wasn't proof. But it felt like something more unsettling. Intuition confirmed by coincidence. Or maybe not coincidence at all. He picked up the napkin again. The ink was fading slightly in the overhead fluorescent light, but the impression remained. This girl, whoever she was, had drawn the dam's weak point by feel. Not from calculations, not from pressure data, just from something she saw or sensed. Ben leaned back in his chair. He'd been here 3 months, fresh from graduate school, assigned to the Mill Bend Centennial Project to help coordinate the acoustic-safe blast radius for the fireworks show. His work wasn't glamorous. Most of it involved sound pressure decay charts, drone footage of the dam's foundation, and making sure the celebration didn't shake loose anything critical in the stone vaults. But now, looking at this napkin, he realized something awful. He might have missed it. Ben opened the original simulation again. The waveform was subtle, almost negligible, just a 2.3% lateral reverb at subharmonic resonance. But if it synced with the layered percussion of the fireworks, especially the double launch planned for 8:05, that 2.3% could become a standing wave. A standing wave in water pressure wasn't like sound in air. It built silently, then snapped. Vault D4 had hairline fissures from the last flood season. Engineers had said they were stable. Ben had believed them. Now he wasn't sure. The napkin sat between his palms like a message from someone who didn't know they were sending one. He flipped it over. No name, no initials, just a single tiny mark in the bottom corner. A small spiral drawn in reverse, curling outward instead of in. The next morning, Ben returned to the school. He stood just inside the cafeteria doors, clipboard in hand, pretending to check lighting fixtures while scanning the room. Then he saw her. Same table, same seat, same hunched posture. Hazel. She was drawing again. He approached slowly. "Hi," he said, as gently as he could. She didn't look up. Her pen kept moving. Ben tried again. "Sorry. I just noticed you're, really good at patterns." Still no reaction. The girl finished her current loop, then finally glanced up. Her eyes were wide, quiet, not shy, not really, just tired of being misread. Ben held up the napkin. "This yours?" Hazel's eyes flicked to it. She didn't answer. "I think you might have helped me catch something important," he said. "Something about the dam." Her fingers tightened around her pen. "You drew this, didn't you?" he asked. Hazel hesitated, then nodded. Ben sat down across from her without asking. "How did you know?" She looked at him for a long time, then whispered, "It's leaning." He blinked. "The dam?" She nodded. "You can see it?" "No." Hazel tapped her chest, then the napkin. "I feel it. It hums. Like in my bones." Ben didn't laugh. He didn't scoff. Because the model he'd been analyzing last night? The pressure profile had a frequency. A very low one, not audible, but maybe, just maybe, perceptible. He leaned in. "Did anyone teach you about structural resonance?" Hazel shook her head. "Math?" She shrugged. "Only the kind that moves?" Ben exhaled slowly. The girl was serious, and more than that, she was right. He stood. "Hazel, do you want to help me with something?" Her eyes narrowed. "Will it stop them?" "Stop who?" "The ones putting fireworks on the dam." Ben felt a chill run through him. "Yes," he said, "but only if they listen." Hazel stared down at her napkin. "They won't." Ben paused, then gently lifted the napkin, careful not to smudge the fading spiral. "Then we'll make them." It wasn't the crack that scared her. It was the part no one else seemed to hear. The hum right before it. Hazel sat in the passenger seat of a dusty utility truck, the kind with rust stains under the doors and half the radio buttons missing. The seatbelt didn't quite click, but she held it anyway. Fingers wound around the strap like it might anchor her if the world tilted too far again. Ben Carter drove in silence. She didn't ask where they were going. she already knew. From the minute he handed her the folded napkin again, pressed flat now, stored in a plastic sleeve like a relic, she understood. This wasn't about convincing him anymore. It was about trying to stop everyone else from forgetting what rivers could do when they were tired of being quiet. They pulled up to the small control center at the edge of the dam, just past a locked gate with a faded metal sign. Millbend Hydro. Authorized personnel only. Ben tapped a code into the keypad. The gate opened with a reluctant clank. Hazel stepped out of the truck and felt the air shift. It was subtle, like walking into a room where someone had just finished a long conversation, the kind with more silence than words. She walked slowly to the edge of the overlook. The dam stretched out below her like a sleeping giant. Long, curved, layered in limestone and age. It had stood for nearly a century, holding back the river like a palm holding breath. Children had drawn it on school posters. Couples had posed in front of it for engagement photos. It was pride, heritage, monument. But Hazel didn't see pride. She saw tension. She saw pressure pulling tight between stones too proud to admit they were cracking. And she heard it. Not with her ears. Not exactly. It came like a pressure behind her sternum, low and steady, a sound without sound. The hum. Ben noticed the way she froze. "You okay?" Hazel nodded, but she wasn't. "Can you tell me what you feel?" he asked. She stared at the far right side of the dam wall where the moss grew in a slightly darker patch. "It's not balanced," she said. "It's not echoing back." Ben frowned. "Echoing?" She tapped her fingers against the railing. 1, 2. 1, 2. When something holds, it pushes back, like breathing in, out. But this... She pressed again, and this time her finger paused in the air. "It's only going in." Ben looked toward the vault, exactly the section he'd marked in his simulation. Inside the control room, Hazel sat on a stool while Ben loaded his laptop with the latest structural resonance data. "I want you to see this," he said, pulling up a color-mapped 3D diagram of the dam's stress points. Hazel blinked at the screen. She didn't know what the colors meant, but her eyes landed on a red blotch near the edge. She pointed. "That's where it breaks." Ben turned to her slowly. "Why?" "Because that's where it's listening too hard," she whispered. At 11:43 a.m., the committee overseeing the Millbend Centennial fireworks arrived. 6 men in polo shirts. 1 woman in heels too tall for this terrain. Smiles wide. Voices louder than they needed to be. Hazel watched them from a corner chair, half hidden behind a filing cabinet. Ben introduced her briefly. They looked at her napkin sketch like a crayon drawing from a preschooler, then turned back to the slide deck. Ben clicked through charts, explained resonance thresholds, firework cadence. The possibility, slim but real, of acoustic feedback along the east wall. He showed them the simulation, the margin of error, the napkin. Hazel watched their faces. Only 1 man flinched. The others nodded politely, laughed once. 1 checked his phone. "Let me be clear," said the woman in heels, her voice as crisp as her blazer. "Are you suggesting we cancel the launch based on a drawing?" Ben tried to answer. "Not just the drawing. The data backs it. But the pattern helped me see what I missed. She—" "A child," the woman interrupted. "No offense, sweetie." Hazel looked away. Ben's voice tightened. "If we ignore this and the vault cracks, we're not just losing a wall. We're losing half the town." The committee exchanged glances. The youngest of the group, a man with anxious eyes, finally spoke. What if we move the launch platform 20 meters back? Would that shift the pressure away from Vault D4? Ben nodded. It might, at least enough to reduce the harmonic interaction. The woman frowned. And how much would that cost? 5,000, maybe less. She tapped her tablet. That's not in the budget. Ben stared. We're talking about human lives. She smiled thinly. And public panic. You want us to announce that the town's beloved dam is unsafe based on a napkin and a gut feeling? Hazel stood. She didn't mean to. Her legs just did it. Then her voice, small, soft, but unshaking, followed. It's not a feeling, she said. They all turned. She stepped forward, holding her copy of the napkin. I've been listening to it, all week. The river, the wall. It's breathing different now. It used to push back. Now it just swallows. The room was silent. Ben stepped beside her. Please, just delay the test launch. One day. That's all we're asking. The woman sighed. We'll take it under advisement. They left. That night, Hazel sat on her porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees. The rain had returned, thin and quiet. Her mother sat inside, unaware. She hadn't noticed Hazel hadn't eaten dinner, didn't notice the napkin Hazel now folded again and again in her lap. She traced the curve with her fingertip, eyes half closed. Not because she was tired, but because she could hear it louder now. The hum was rising. She didn't need a chart. She didn't need approval. She needed someone, anyone, to believe that something could break long before it cracked. He didn't want to believe a child had seen what he hadn't. But what scared him more was that she might be right. Ben Carter hadn't gone home. The control station lights buzzed softly overhead, the kind of flickering fluorescence that made time feel like it wasn't moving. Outside, the rain came in bursts, soft at first, then suddenly angry, then gone again. But the storm inside his head didn't let up. He stared at the napkin for the 3rd hour in a row. He had scanned it already, laid it atop the simulation. Every spiral matched a pressure contour. Every fold in the ink echoed a ridge in the model. Hazel's drawing wasn't vague intuition. It was map work without numbers. And she hadn't even known what resonance meant. Ben swallowed the lump in his throat. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was a warning. He pulled up the original construction files of the Millbend Dam, eyes burning from the backlight. Blueprints from 1925, renovation notes from 1971, retrofitting logs from 1994. He flipped through them slowly. The Vault D4 cavity had been flagged once, 28 years ago, for minor subsurface movement. Nothing structural, they said, just age-related expansion. Ben's brow furrowed, then something else. A page was missing. It wasn't a blank space. The file simply skipped from document 212 to 214. He searched the internal database. File 213, Structural Integrity Memo, Vault D4, Access Restricted. His stomach turned. He called the senior systems engineer. Voicemail. He texted, Urgent. Need clearance to D4 Integrity Memo. Something's off. No reply. He leaned back in the creaking office chair and rubbed his temples. Maybe Hazel hadn't just stumbled onto a physics problem. Maybe she'd wandered into a secret someone didn't want exposed. By 1:17 a.m., Ben had done what he never thought he would. He printed the napkin sketch on official letterhead, signed it, attached it to the simulation failure logs. Wrote at the top in thick black Sharpie, Recommend firework test delay until structural review of Vault D4. He sealed it in an envelope and placed it on the director's desk. He didn't know if anyone would read it, but now they couldn't say they hadn't been warned. Meanwhile, Hazel lay in bed, not sleeping. The hum was louder, but worse than that. It had changed. Before, it had felt like a breath being held. Now it felt like a breath being pushed too far in, past the rib cage, where something fragile begins to ache. She got up quietly, bare feet padding across cold linoleum. Her mom stirred once in the next room, then settled back into her soft, weary snore. Hazel sat at the tiny kitchen table, turned on the dim lamp, and pulled a fresh napkin from the holder. She didn't draw the dam this time. She drew the break. The way it would crack, not in a clean collapse, but like a spider web, the kind that started invisible and spread in silence. She labeled nothing. She didn't know how. She just knew what it would feel like the second before it gave way. And that was enough. At sunrise, Ben returned to the site. He found his envelope gone from the desk, replaced by a short note in red pen. Fireworks test proceeding as scheduled. Vault D4 deemed within tolerance. No name. No explanation. Just a decision. Ben crumpled the note in his hand. Then he walked to the observation deck. The river glistened below, innocent as ever. But the air, even the air, felt off-kilter, like it was holding its weight sideways. He pulled out his phone, called Hazel. She picked up after 2 rings. "They're not stopping," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered. There was a pause. Then she added, "But I'm not either." At 4:35 p.m., Hazel walked alone to the riverbank near the east wall of the dam. She sat on the rocks where she used to fish with her dad, opened a sketchbook, and began to draw. Not warnings, not spirals, but a map. Of how the town could be flooded if the vault broke. Which streets would go first, which rooftops would be safe, where children would need to be pulled from. That night, the napkin wasn't the only thing that held truth. Now the sketchbook did too. The town just didn't know it yet. And time was running out. Not all old men forget. Some remember the sound of pressure before the world learns to measure it. Hazel knocked on the faded green door 3 times. She hadn't been here in 2 years. Not since her dad used to stop by after fishing trips to drop off smoked catfish and trade stories about things that probably never happened, but sounded true anyway. The door opened slow. Behind it stood Mr. Samuel Kerrigan, or Old Sam, as everyone in Millbend called him. Ex-dam technician, war veteran, local eccentric, and the only adult Hazel had ever seen talk 2 rivers like they could talk back. His eyes narrowed. "Well, I'll be." Hazel Quinn. She didn't smile. "I need you to look at something." He stepped aside. "Then you'd better come in, Barefoot prophet." Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and old tobacco. Blueprints were pinned to the walls like wallpaper. Not just of the dam, but of old bridges, storm drains, canals, turbines. His living room was a shrine to water held at bay. Hazel pulled the notebook from her backpack and laid it on the coffee table. Sam leaned over it, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. He didn't speak for 5 full minutes. Then, quietly, he said, "How long's it been humming like that?" Hazel's eyes welled. "A week, maybe more, but it changed 2 nights ago, got tighter." Sam nodded slowly, like someone wringing a towel, ready to snap. "Yes." He sat back. "They're still going through with the fireworks, aren't they?" She nodded. Sam's mouth twisted. Fools. He stood up, walked over to an old drawer, and pulled out a rolled tube of paper sealed with yellowed tape. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing an original stress displacement map of the Mill Bend Dam from 1972. The paper was brittle but clear. He pointed to Vault D4. "This spot?" he said. Hazel nodded. "Yes." He tapped it twice. "That's where I almost died once." She looked up. 1979, minor quake upstate. No one felt it here, but the pressure wave traveled under the waterline. This vault shifted a third of an inch in 10 seconds. They patched it, buried it in paperwork, and told us never to speak of it again. Hazel blinked. "I filed a memo," Sam said. "They buried it." She pulled something from her pocket, a printed screenshot Ben had given her. File 213, access restricted. Sam's face hardened. "They're hiding it still." He looked at her again, but this time not as a child. "You're not just feeling this. You're mapping it. You're reading pressure the way other folks read headlines." Hazel swallowed. "So what do we do?" Sam stared at the wall, silent for a long moment. Then he said, "We don't ask. We show." That night, just before 9 p.m., Hazel and Sam stood at the edge of the town square. Behind them, the festival lights were being strung. Giant banners reading, "Mill Bend Centennial, 100 years strong," flapped in the breeze. In front of them, pinned to a freestanding board outside Town Hall, were 12 hand-drawn pages. Hazel's sketches, Sam's blueprint overlays, Ben's pressure chart printouts. One title above them all, "The Fault Line You Won't See on the Poster." By morning, half the town had seen it. Some laughed, some shrugged, but a few stopped and stared. A woman whose daughter played on the field below the dam. A man who remembered the strange vibration in his basement during last year's storms. A grocery clerk who noticed her faucet water had started pulsing when no one else was using it. And something started to shift, not loudly, but steadily. By noon, Hazel stood in the corner of the town square, alone, clutching her backpack straps tight. Then a voice came behind her. "You made people look." She turned. Ben stood there, holding a folder. "I brought this," he said. "Full analysis. Unofficial, but it backs everything." Hazel's eyes searched his. "Will it stop them?" He looked toward the dam. "I don't know. But it might start something." They said the room was for experts only, but her drawing was already on the table. The room was carpeted, cold, and windowless. 12 people sat around a long oval table. Engineers, city planners, legal advisors, and one carefully groomed woman in a red blazer, who chaired the meeting with a voice as smooth as steel. Hazel wasn't there, but her napkin was, not the original, but a scanned copy, enlarged to fit neatly on slide 5 of Ben Carter's emergency presentation. "We're here," the woman began, "to address concerns that have arisen regarding the structural integrity of Vault D4 in the Mill Bend Dam in proximity to Saturday's fireworks launch." She said it like reading an ingredients label. Ben adjusted his collar. His heart beat too fast, but his words came calm. "This is not just a concern," he said. "It's a variable you haven't modeled yet." A man with thick glasses spoke. "The vault passed all inspections." "That was last quarter," Ben said. "But resonance builds cumulatively. And when I compared the latest wave decay simulations, I found a drift pattern. An asymmetry right here." He clicked the pointer. The screen zoomed in on a sloping contour line near Vault D4. Another man, lean, older, jaw like granite, leaned forward. "That's within tolerance." Ben shook his head. Not when you pair it with cumulative echo frequencies. I've run the math 3 times. And this, the woman tapped her pen against the napkin image. What is this exactly? Ben hesitated. A visual overlay, drawn by a local student, but it matches the failure vector with alarming precision. There was silence, then a quiet laugh from the man in the granite jaw. You're building safety protocol based on a child's doodle? Ben's voice didn't rise, but his jaw clenched. No. I'm showing that something real is being felt before we can fully model it. And if a child can sense the hum of the dam and trace its weakness, then maybe we've failed as engineers, the woman cut in smoothly. Is that what you're suggesting? Ben paused. Then, yes. Across town, Hazel sat on the library steps, her backpack under her knees. She knew the meeting was happening. She knew she wasn't invited. She didn't expect to be, but she felt it. The hum had changed again, not just inside the wall, inside her. Something sharp now. Something like holding your breath while someone counts too slow. Back in the meeting, the debate spiraled. The vault's age is a factor. No one wants to cancel the centennial launch. We'd be causing panic over hypotheticals. This would damage public trust. And finally, fine, the woman in the red blazer said. We'll conduct a final resonance test at 5:00 p.m. tomorrow. If it passes, we proceed. Ben opened his mouth. And if it fails? We'll discuss contingency. But the damage might already be... We will decide then, she snapped. That's enough speculation for now. She clicked the remote. The screen went black. The napkin disappeared. But no one noticed. Ben had kept the original in his jacket, just in case. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees, Hazel returned to the overlook. She didn't bring a notebook, didn't bring her drawings, just herself, and one stick of chalk. She knelt on the concrete edge and began drawing again. Not a warning, not a spiral, but a message. One line, looping outward, curling wide, free, fierce, then looping back in sharply at the very end, forming a hook. A shape her father once called a snapback curl. The last turn before something breaks, he'd said. She didn't know who would see it, but she left it there, bright white, one loop from truth. They ran the simulation to prove her wrong, but the line curved where she said it would, and then it kept going. At exactly 4:59 p.m., the dam shook. Not violently, not even visibly, but deep inside, where no camera reached, no sensor blinked red. A slight tremor passed through Vault D4 like a breath caught between ribs. On the 3rd floor of the control station, inside a sealed glass lab, 3 engineers watched the readings, all of them silent. Ben Carter stood in the corner, arms folded tight, staring at the pressure distribution model like it might lie again if he blinked too slow. The resonance test had begun 20 minutes earlier. A series of controlled sonic pulses, designed to mimic the vibration impact of the firework launch, had been pumped through the dam's lower vaults. Nothing dangerous, nothing dramatic. It was just data. It was supposed to be clean. But at 5:02 p.m., something unexpected happened. The wave returned, not as a clean rebound, but as a curve. A subtle off-angle echo that didn't return in the same direction. It tilted just slightly, like a ripple refusing to go back to where it came from. And then it began to repeat. Each pulse returned with more tilt, more curve, like something deep inside the dam was pivoting or slipping. The senior systems engineer swore under his breath. "What is that?" Ben stepped closer. Loop-back asymmetry. Another engineer shook his head. No, that's not loop-back. That's a shear contour. But it's shifting. Ben leaned closer. His voice dropped. Run the overlay. The technician hesitated, then keyed it in. The 3D model flickered, then re-rendered. This time with Hazel's hand-drawn curve, scanned from the napkin, placed over the stress lines. Silence fell. Because it matched. Not just vaguely, perfectly. The echo curve was her shape, her warning. Shut it down, someone said. The lead tech hit a switch. The pulses stopped. The room exhaled. The senior engineer turned to Ben. You knew? Ben didn't answer. He just pointed at the curve. She knew. 30 minutes later, the committee reconvened in the main hall. The room felt different now. Quieter. More brittle. The woman in the red blazer read the report in silence. Her fingers tapped the tabletop, slower than usual. Across from her, Ben placed the original napkin on the table. No projector, no speech, just one napkin, one curve, one proof that didn't need a formula. We recommend full suspension of all launch activities near the dam, Ben said. Effective immediately. Is it unstable? Someone asked. It's not collapsing, yet, but it's listening, and it's leaning. No one laughed. Not anymore. The woman in red folded her hands. What do you mean it's listening? Ben looked at her. Sometimes a structure doesn't fail from force. It fails from rhythm, from being asked to hold the wrong music too long. She didn't reply, but she nodded. Once, then said softly, cancel the launch. At 6:41 p.m., the loudspeakers around the town square crackled to life. A short announcement. Due to unforeseen structural inconsistencies, the fireworks display has been postponed. People groaned. Vendors complained. But the river didn't care, and neither did the dam. Because finally, it was being heard. Hazel stood on the edge of the overlook, chalk still in her hand. The wind carried the echo of the town's disappointment. But she didn't flinch. She traced the last curl of her spiral again, deepening the hook where she knew it had started to bend. Behind her, footsteps. Ben. He didn't say anything for a while, then finally, you saved them, you know. Hazel looked out over the water. No, she said. I just listened. Sometimes, the most important thing in the world is the thing that didn't go wrong. The fireworks never launched. At exactly 8 p.m., when the sky should have split into celebration and color, Millbend stood quiet. Not in mourning, not in panic, just listening. The children still played in the square. The cotton candy still melted on small tongues. But the air held something else now. Something tighter, as if the town collectively knew that the silence wasn't empty. It was earned. Hazel didn't attend the canceled festival. She sat on the steps outside the closed library, fingers still chalk-streaked, a half-eaten apple beside her. She didn't feel proud or vindicated. She just felt still, like the river, like the dam. Ben sat beside her, elbows on his knees, gaze fixed somewhere far. They ran another test this morning, he said quietly. Without pressure. Just sonar mapping. Hazel glanced at him. And? He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket, unfolded it slowly. The sonar diagram showed a slight deformation, right along the vault's inner wall. Nothing catastrophic, but a bend. A quiet, creeping one. They said if the launch had gone forward, and the percussion had landed just wrong. He paused. They ran collapse models. The wave would have hit the south bend of the riverbank in 37 seconds. Hazel didn't speak. Ben added, "Your house would have gone under in 2 minutes." She looked down. "I don't think my mom would have run." Ben swallowed hard. "That's why I couldn't stay quiet." Hazel whispered, "That's why I couldn't either." The next day, something strange happened. Someone left a pair of shoes on Hazel's front porch. Not new, but clean. Laces double-knotted. Inside one was a note. "Sometimes the ones who see curves are the only ones keeping things straight." M. Keller, Civil Design Unit. Hazel left the shoes on the step. She wasn't ready for them. Not yet. Later that afternoon, Ben received a message from a contact in Atlanta. A small team from a private hydrodynamics lab had requested access to the test footage from Milben's cancellation, citing anomalous acoustic deflection patterns. Nothing unusual, except the request came from a lab tied to a patent firm, not an academic journal. Ben didn't answer. Instead, he drove to Hazel's house. She was out back, sitting on the ground, drawing circles in the dirt again. No spiral this time. Just one wide curve that ended in a flat line. "Hazel," he said softly. "Can we talk?" She nodded. He crouched beside her. "I think they want to use your shape, not your name, just the curve. Patent it. Make it theirs." She didn't seem surprised. "They'll smooth it," she murmured. "Cut the breath out of it. Add numbers." "Yes." "Then it won't work anymore." Ben nodded. Hazel picked up a rock, traced the arc again, deeper. Then said, "We should draw it where they can't steal it." He frowned. "Where?" She looked up. "On people." That night, at the old playground behind the church, Hazel and 3 other kids used sidewalk chalk to trace her spiral. Not the exact one, not the napkin curve, but a new version. Bigger, freer, dancing across the cracked pavement like it belonged there all along. A younger boy joined in. Then a girl from the middle school, then a teen who used to mock Hazel, now quietly picked up a stick of chalk and helped outline the outer ring. Someone took a photo, posted it online. No caption. Just 3 words. She drew safety. By morning, the image had been shared hundreds of times. Not viral, not explosive, but steady, like a ripple. In a high-rise office miles away, a man in a charcoal suit opened the photo on his tablet. He zoomed in on the spiral, then on the girl, then muttered to his assistant, "Find her." They couldn't erase her voice, because her voice had never been in ink. It was in the curve itself. It started with a website, sleek, professional, cold. A press release from Ardent Flow Systems, a hydrodynamics firm based out of Chicago. The article was titled, "Innovative Acoustic Resonance Contour Enhances Structural Predictability in Dam Engineering." No mention of Milben. No mention of Vault D4. No mention of Hazel. But the diagram. It was hers. Cleaned up, digitized, labeled with gradients and Greek letters she'd never used. The curve was mirrored, smoothed, stripped of breath, but unmistakable. Her napkin, her loop, her curve. Ben found the article at 2:17 a.m. while reading updates on resonance research threads. He stared at the screen for a long time, then printed it, drove through the dark streets of Milben, knocked on Hazel's door just after 3:00 a.m. She opened it barefoot, hair mussed, eyes quiet but awake. He handed her the paper. She didn't blink. She just looked at it, then whispered, "They turned it into math." Ben nodded. "And erased you." That morning, Hazel sat under the pecan tree behind the school, sketchbook open. Around her, the town began to hum again. Not the hum of warning, but of daily life. Kids laughing, cars starting, brooms on sidewalks. But inside her, the old hum returned. Not from the dam, not from water, from the memory of being invisible. She turned the page, wrote one sentence. "If they take the name, I'll write it into the dirt again." By noon, the Ardent Flow press release had spread to 3 major engineering blogs. Comments flooded in. Amazing use of acoustic symmetry. Inspired contour modeling. Future of dynamic infrastructure. No one questioned the origin. Until one. A user named @SiltSignal47 posted a side-by-side. Left, Hazel's original napkin scan. Right, Ardent's press image. Caption: same breath, one signed, one stolen. The post didn't explode, but it bled. Across quiet corners of academic Twitter, across niche hydrology groups, across the inboxes of a few quietly enraged engineers. At 3:00 p.m., Hazel received a letter. A real one, hand-delivered, from a courier in a pressed gray uniform. It was from Ardent's legal team. Cold language, smoothed words, but the core was clear. The contour currently used by Ardent Flow Systems was developed independently. Any similarity to previously circulated amateur sketches is coincidental. We request that all parties refrain from making attributional claims. Hazel handed the letter to Ben. He read it twice, then asked, "What do you want to do?" Hazel looked down at her chalk-stained hands, then replied, "Draw where they can't reach." That night, they gathered in the empty lot behind the church. Ben brought a projector. Old Sam brought blueprints. Half the town showed up. No invitations, just a rumor. That the girl who stopped the dam from breaking was going to draw the thing that someone else claimed to own. Hazel stood in the center. A single spotlight lit the cracked concrete. She held no notes, no mic, just a stick of white chalk. She looked at the crowd, then crouched and drew. First, the base curve, then the off-center spiral, then the tension loop, not perfect, not polished, but alive. Then beside it, she added a handprint, her own, pressed in chalk dust, then stood and said, "This isn't mine, but it isn't theirs." She looked around. "It belongs to anyone who ever saw something leaning and said, 'That's going to break.'" The crowd didn't cheer. They just nodded. A few wiped their eyes. Ben stepped forward, held up a folder. Inside, a declaration of public domain, filed that morning. Attached, Hazel's napkin scan, her spiral model, her signature. License, Creative Commons, no ownership, no patent, no silence. By sunrise, the image of Hazel's chalk spiral and handprint had made it to every corner of the design world. A new name began to appear. Hazel's Curve, the breath before break contour. Not in textbooks yet, but in conversations, in forums, in classrooms, even in a mural on the side of a school in a coastal village in Maine. And none of them asked if it came from a child. They just said, "This one held." She never built a monument, but they kept drawing her shape, like it had always belonged to them, too. The dam never broke. Not that week, not that month. Inspections came and went. Reinforcements were added quietly, without press releases. Vault D4 was sealed off for long-term maintenance. No one mentioned the napkin in official reports, but Millbend changed. Not all at once. but in the smallest places first, in how the mayor paused longer during safety drills, in how the school started using chalk again, in how one of the chalk spirals Hazel drew behind the church was never washed away. Hazel never tried to correct them when they got the name wrong. Some called it the spiral curve, others Hazel's breath line. One article called it Quinn's tension geometry. She just smiled when she heard it, because it wasn't the name that mattered. It was that they finally saw it. 2 weeks after the legal fight ended, Hazel walked past the playground and saw something that made her stop mid-step. A girl, maybe 6 or 7, crouched alone near the swings, dragging a piece of blue chalk across the pavement. She wasn't drawing a star, not a heart, but a spiral. Jagged, messy, off-centered. Hazel crouched beside her. "Nice shape," she said. The girl looked up shyly. "It's not perfect." Hazel smiled. "It doesn't have to be. Just breathe when you draw." The girl tried again. This time her hand moved more slowly, more surely. Hazel stood, kept walking. That spring, a small science museum in Oregon added a new exhibit. Curves of warning, shapes that spoke before cracks appeared. At the center was a faded napkin behind glass. No placard, no explanation. Just a chalk handprint painted on the wall beside it. In the final week of school, Hazel's class was asked to present something that changed the world in a small way. Most kids chose inventions, news stories, electric cars. Hazel brought a shoebox. Inside, 1 napkin, 1 stone, and 1 stick of white chalk. She didn't give a speech. She just placed the box on the table and drew a spiral on the board. Nothing more. But that night, 3 other spirals showed up in the school hallway. Drawn by hands Hazel didn't recognize. Ben moved on quietly, too. He took a job at a non-profit engineering firm that focused on small towns and sound-sensitive structures. He didn't tell them about Hazel right away. He let them ask, and they always did. "Who thought of this curve?" Ben would pause, then say, "Someone who listened deeper than we were trained to." Hazel's mother never fully understood what had happened. She still called it that little drawing thing whenever it came up. But sometimes when Hazel left for school, she'd find the sink wiped clean, a fresh stack of napkins left beside it, folded neatly, waiting. And on a warm evening in early June, Hazel returned to the riverbank. No reporters, no fanfare, just her, and the wall, and the water. She stood on the overlook, traced her fingers along the railing, the dam still standing, the town still breathing. The echo? Still there, but not sharp anymore. Now it sounded like something singing. She knelt, pulled a napkin from her pocket, laid it on the concrete, and wrote 3 words. Still listening. H. Then let the wind take it. The napkin floated, curled once, twice, then disappeared into the still, shining water. No one builds a statue for a girl who scribbles on a napkin. There was no grand ceremony, no medals, no headlines. But sometimes the thing that saves a town doesn't come from the loudest voice. It comes from the quietest certainty, from a spiral drawn in solitude, from a feeling in the chest that something is about to shift before any machine can measure it. Hazel never wanted to be famous. She just wanted to be believed once. And the miracle is, she didn't need to shout to change anything. She just needed to draw it right and not erase it. This story is a gentle reminder. Somewhere out there, someone is quietly listening to what the world has forgotten how to hear. A child is drawing crooked spirals on the sidewalk, ignored by everyone. And maybe, just maybe, one of them is holding back the brake. If you meet a child like that, don't take the chalk. Sit beside them, listen, and let them teach you how to hear the world before it cracks. Thank you for walking with Hazel all the way to the last spiral. The author.